Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Terus berpacu dalam keunggulan, lincah pembelajar untuk kehidupan. Inilah semangat baru, tekad raih kesempatan, wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya.
Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah.
Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, best wishes for all of us. Welcome back to the parallel session of the ISOTOBAT 2026 International Conference organized by the Directorate of Strategic Studies and Academic Reputation of IPB University. Please let me introduce myself. My name is Bunga Anggreni and I will be the Master of Ceremony for this parallel session under subtheme Socioeconomic and Business Transformation in Tropical Bioresource. Thank you very much for all the presenter and participant for joining us today. Welcome to our invited speaker, Dr. Safil Ramadona. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Safil. Okay. Also our moderator for today's session, Ibu Nurul Hidayati, MSI. Thank you for joining us today, Ibu. Okay, before we begin, please allow me to explain a few important rules for this session. One, please change your Zoom display name to the following format: paper ID underscore name. Two, the Zoom room will be attended by the MC, moderator, invited speaker, presenter, and participant. Three, all presenter and required to attend all conference sessions starting from the plenary session until the end of the parallel session. Four, co-author are welcome to join the conference without registration. Five, all participants, including presenter and audience member, are required to complete the attendance form. Six, the MC will be open its presentation session, followed by the moderator who will lead this session. Seven, its invited speaker will be allocated 15 minutes in total, consisting of the 10 minutes for the presentation session and 5 minutes for Q&A session. Eight, each presenter will be allocated 10 minutes in total, consisting 5 to 7 minutes for video playback and remaining for Q&A session. Nine, participants are kindly requested to keep their microphone mute. And then, during the Q&A session, participants may share their opinion or ask questions for raising their hand or type in the chat box. Before we starting this presentation session, I want to invite you all participants in Zoom to turn the camera because we will some photo together. Okay, I will count it. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Once again, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, to lead our parallel session, today it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator. Our moderator for this session is Ibu Nurul Hidayati, MSI. Ibu Nurul is a lecturer at the Department of Management, IPB University. She has expertise in several fields, including production and operational management, quality management, and marketing management. Without further ado, I invite Ibu Nurul to lead our presentation session. Ibu Nurul, please, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you Miss Bunga for your introduction. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah, good morning everyone. Hopefully you are in a happy and good mood in this morning. Yes, I will be moderator for this parallel session in subtheme socioeconomics and business transformation in tropical bioresources in Isotobet 2026. In here we have one invited speaker, Mr. Safil Ramadana, PhD, and then we have about 5 until 6 presenters member, yeah, in the parallel session. So I will start with the introduction our invited speaker. He is Mr. Sefil Ramadana, PhD from Tokyo University of Agriculture, Japan, and he has expertise in applied statistics, data science, ICT in agriculture and fishery, consumer behavior, and agribusiness. And right now, Mr. Sefil with us in room Zoom. Hello, Assalamualaikum. Good morning, Mr.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, thank you.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you too.
Yeah, thanks for your availability to be invited speaker in this parallel session. So, Mr. Samuel will present his valuable insight about the 10 minutes, and then we will continue with the Q&A session. So, for audience, if you have any question, we can discuss in the Q&A session. So we can continue to the Mr. Samuel session. So please, time is yours.
Right. Thank you very much. Please allow me to share my screen. There you go. Okay. So I'm just gonna share my screen right here. Right. Can all of you see my screen?
Yes, yes, I can see your screen, Mr.
Nice. Wait. Okay. So yeah, thank you very much. And in today's talk, I would like to talk about socioeconomic and business transformation of tropical bioresources, especially for digitalization for a better future. I am Ramadana Safil from Tokyo University of Agriculture. This is the outline that we are going to talk about today. First, in a tropical country, we have several paradoxes of bioresources. First, the tropical region is, of course, has a huge potential of bioeconomic, right? Because we have a lot of forests, we have a lot of, like, for example, species of biology things, and so on and so on. And especially for Indonesia, as we know, 70% of Indonesian area is, a sea. And we have one of the longest shoreline in the world, which is around 99,000 kilometers. And so for that kind of case, we are really strong in mariculture, seaweed, and of course, fisheries too. However, the producers in some developing countries, especially in Indonesia, often trapped in a cycle of low margin commodity production, as we know. But we need to remember as well, Indonesia export a fish so-called groupers, which is very high margin. On your left side, I show you the picture of a grouper. It's an aquaculture in Bali. Okay. Yeah. Indonesian government especially have promotes grouper aquaculture or mariculture since 1990s, and groupers is really expensive. If you go to Hong Kong or China, you can find easily a live grouper for you to eat in a restaurant. It's averagely 40 to 60 US dollar per kilogram. And grouper usually, the plate size of grouper is 500 grams, meaning 1 kilogram is just 2 fishes. So it's really expensive. And the export of the grouper in 2000 was 1,000 ton, and in roughly 2020 it was like 4,000 tons. So the export itself is kind of big, right? In Indonesia as well, there is an area in North Bali, so-called Gondol. It's one of the largest grouper farming center in Indonesia since 1990, set by the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Affairs. The problem is, grouper itself has a very high mortality. The feed cost is really high too. It's labor intensive, and grouper fish mortality often rate more than 50%, meaning, for example, you have 10,000 seedling of grouper, and then you can only harvest, like, for example, 5,000. Half of them are going to die. That's such an unfortunate. Even a survey of our group between 2018 and 2019, in 2 years, the average mortality was 70%. Meaning, if you have initial 10,000 groupers in your aquaculture, you can just harvest only 3,000 of them. That's a very, very big unfortunate issue. It means the fish mortality prediction for DSS, by the way, DSS is a decision support system, is apparently needed, right? And this is what we've done. We set a sensor network. As you can see in your left side, we have several sensor network of temperature, color, salinity, conductivity, chlorophyll A, turbidity, and also DO. DO is dissolved oxygen. So it's just like the concentration of oxygen in the water. We transmit the data automatically to our cloud database, and in the same time, we also provide the fish farmer an application of fish mortality record, also transmitted to the same database. In the database, we did the analysis. We applied machine learning or AI for some people. The algorithm itself, we use random forest, and the independent variable was water temperature, current, salinity, chlorophyll, turbidity, and DO. We excluded the conductivity because it has a very high correlation with salinity. That's why we only use the salinity one. And of course, the dependent variable is the number of fish mortalities every day. We would like to know how many fish will die, like for example, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and also the day after tomorrow too. And we use 5 levels of fish mortality from level 1 until level 5. It's determined automatically itself and in real time. Why we determine it's in 5 level? Because it's easier for a fish farmer to understand, just like red light. You have red, yellow, and green, right? But we divided it in several level more. Okay, after doing this random forest algorithm in machine learning, we get the accuracy of our fish mortality prediction was approximately 77.6%. And as you can see in your right side, we have a table. We have a table of our prediction and actual level. The precision of each level exceeds 70%, which is considered fairly good. And what is good in using random forest is that in your right bottom side, you can see the feature importance score, which means which variable contribute more to the fish mortality. We found that temperature, turbidity, and salinity are important variable for fish mortality of grouper in our case. And why it's important? First, because we also have a real-time dashboard. This dashboard, as you can see in your left side, can be accessed by a fish farmer, manager, and the owner of the aquaculture site. We have several stuff, and we have 3 days of mortality risk prediction. Why? Because in that aquaculture site, they need to buy the fish feed. In Indonesia, we call it rucah or fish trash. They need to buy it approximately 3 days before the businessman, pick the fish trash up and bring the fish traps to the aquaculture site. That's why we decided that 3 days is one of the most effective mortality risk prediction. And right there, because the manager and the owner also know how many fish will die in the next 3 days, they can manage feed, how much feed that they need to buy, how many labors they need to allocate to. Eventually, it will lead you to a better planning of aquaculture. And this is so-called management information system, because we can manage and we can plan better using information system as well. And as we know, better planning meaning also better business, right? We can cut down the cost, we can just work effectively, and so on and so on and so on. We can also predict the income as well. So because I only have 10 minutes, this is the remarks. I believe that digital transformation in tropical bioresources is not about replacing farmers or replacing fish farmers as well, but it's about providing them with digital shield against risk. In my case, it was fish mortality risk. It was the risk of bad planning. It was the risk of bad managerial of labor. That kind of risk. But the digital shield against risk is really important. And I also believe that in future bioeconomic growth requires the strategy of AI. Well, in specific, it might be data science, and of course, business management, and also socioeconomic insight. So that's all for me. Thank you very much for listening to my talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Okay, everyone, if you have any question, please let me know. And please raise your hand or type your question in the chat box, okay? Yeah, I think this is the interesting topic. Digitalization for a better future, okay? Anyone?
Any question?
Okay. Yeah, maybe from me, Mr. About
Sure,
the
sure.
innovation. Yeah, in your presentation, you in slide 6, you show me about this system, or I don't know what is the, like, but I think this is a new knowledge for me. This is innovation of just, I think, yeah, how of the implementation of this system right now in farmer, it's work or not like this.
Right. Thank you very much. So yes, it's working because they still can access the dashboard of this fish mortality. They can eventually see how many fish will die tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And this system is automatically renewed once a day at 12:30 on the evening in early morning. Yeah, so the fish farmer can, predict, can also make a better decision when they know how many fish will die. Because, like, for example, today we have 10,000 fish, and then tomorrow we only will have 9,500 fishes, for example. You don't have to prepare the feed for 10,000, right? You just need to buy the feed for 9,500. That's less cost of feed. That kind of thing.
Yes,
Thank you for your
okay.
question.
Yeah, okay. I think one question again
Sure, sure.
from me. Yeah, about the farmer. Who is the farmers who implement this system?
Okay. We work with actually the name of the farmer is written right there. That's the owner, I think, Mr. Sunardi, and he lives in northern part of Bali. Yeah, well, yeah, he's Javanese. He's a Javanese man, but he has several businesses in northern Bali, and one of his business is this aquaculture of grouper. And mainly the one who sees this dashboard is him because he's the owner. He needs to know the flow of the money, the flow of the stock of the fish and feed and so on and so on. And also the manager of the aquaculture site. And then the manager and the owner will, tell the labor what to do. So mainly the one who use this dashboard a lot is the owner and the manager.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you for your answer, Mr. Xavier.
Mm-hmm.
I Yeah. For from audience, maybe any question? Okay, I think it's clear. Maybe
Okay,
if
sure.
there are any question, maybe can contact. Oh, we have one audience, Mr. Seville, from
Sure.
Mr. Suprihatin.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation, Pak
Mm-hmm.
Madonna. Yeah, it is very nice. How do you think? I think what the biggest it will be scaling up, yeah, to others, fishermen or farmers. Yeah, what do you think the big challenge to do that?
Oh, right. That is a very difficult question and a very interesting question, as well as a classic question.
Yeah.
Yes. Even if in Japan, it is very difficult to implement this kind of technology to the farmers. also to the fish farmers. That's why we need to have several pilot projects. Like in this case, it's Mr. Sunardi. We would like to make Mr. Sunardi as famous as possible or as successful as possible. Why? Because many fish farmers in our case will look up to Mr. Sunardi. Hey, Mr. Sunardi is really successful. He already implemented this technology in his fish farm, in his aquaculture site. Why don't we also try? Hopefully, that kind of story will appear in the near future. Hopefully, because a lot of fish farmers or even farmers in Indonesia, especially, are skeptical to the technology. They don't really want to use technology because they somehow feel that I cannot really use this technology, or this is very expensive, or I cannot even use WhatsApp properly. So how can I implement this kind of tech in my farm? I think that's one of the biggest challenge. And number two, I think the biggest challenge also is the awareness of farmers. In other occasion, I usually went to the, several fields, meeting several farmers. When I ask, for example, hey, when did you plant this rice, for example? Then he will say, hey, honey, asking to his wife, when did I plant my rice again? He doesn't even remember. Or how much fertilizer did you use for this farm? And then again, he will ask his wife. That's number two big challenge, which is the awareness of recording something. As a farmer or a fish farmer, they don't usually record. And of course, that's our job. That's our job to educate and do the training for farmers or fish farmers. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, Mr. Supre, is enough?
Yeah. Thanks, Pak Ramadana. Is it possible to have further questions because it is very interesting?
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
how do you think how much the cost to adopt it for the farmers?
Right, right. That's also one of a big issue too. Because our project is one of the pilot project, and we brought this sensor from Japan, and before that we imported several parts from the US. It costs several 100 million rupiahs. However, I kind of believe that we have this kind of system in Indonesia already. Like for example, e-fishery. Even though they have a lot of problems right now, but e-fishery I think have similar sensors. It doesn't have to be, our sensor. We need to draw a very big picture. Our sensor is expensive. It costs a lot. But we can also use another low-cost system. It's similar, I believe. Maybe, just maybe, right now, the initial cost of this kind of similar system using some low-cost system or low-cost sensor network still price about tens of millions of Indonesian rupiahs. But for grouper farmer, I think they can manage because they have quite a big, revenue. It's the matter of they are willing to invest or not. That kind of thing.
Okay, thank you, Pak Ramadana.
Hopefully we can discuss it further.
Yes, I have
Sure.
some further question, but maybe time is up.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Pak Supri and Mr. Seville for the Q&A session. I think this is the last because time
Sure,
is up. Yeah. Thanks
sure.
again for Mr. Seville for your attendance today to be invited speakers. And
Thank you
have
very
nice
much
day.
too. For
Yeah,
you
thank
too, guys.
you. Yeah, see you next time. Okay, everyone, we will continue our parallel session with the first group from Miss Nazwa Nurhaliza and team with the paper entitled Beyond a Beverage, an ethnographic study of coffee juice and consumer experience in Yogyakarta. Okay, operator can play in the video.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Nazwa Nurhaliza from IPB University. It is a pleasure to share our study entitled Beyond a Beverage, an ethnographic study of coffee juice and consumer experience in Yogyakarta. Coffee juice is a traditional charcoal-infused coffee that originated in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, and it's closest connected with Angkringan culture. The beverage is prepared by inserting hot charcoal into brew coffee, producing a distinctive sizzling sound known as joss. This preparation method creates a unique sensory experience and has become part of Yogyakarta culinary identity. Angkringan itself appears in several traditional formats, including cart-based stall and the shoulder carried style known as pikulan. Although this format appears mobile, most vendors operated in permanent location and serve as an informal social space for the community. Despite its popularity, studies discussing coffee juice from cultural and consumer perspective remain limited. Therefore, this research explores how coffee juice function not only as a drink, but also as a social and cultural experience. This study aims to explore the cultural significance and consumer experience of coffee juice within Yogyakarta's Angkringan culture. More specifically, the research focused on characterizing Angkringan practices, identifying food and beverage diversity, analyzing consumer preferences, and examining coffee juice as a form of cultural identity and social symbolism. An ethnographic and exploratory approach was applied in this study. Data were collected in several Angkringan areas in Yogyakarta, including Malioboro, Tugu Putih, Alun-Alun Kidul, and Pasar Keranggangan during August 2025. The study involved participant observation, in-depth interview, and consumer surveys with 31 vendors and 51 consumers. These findings show that coffee juice is strongly embedded in Angkringan culture. Besides serving as a beverage, coffee juice reflects traditional preparation practices that contribute to its authenticity and attraction among consumers. Different Angkringan formats were also identified, ranging from cart-based stall to pikulan style, highlighting the traditional character of these small-scale food businesses in Yogyakarta. Angkringan offer a wide variety of traditional food and beverages, such as nasi kucing, satay, fried snack, herbal drink, and coffee juice as one of the signature beverages. This diversity supports of casual and communal dining atmosphere commonly associated with Angkringan culture. Several types of ground coffee and wood charcoal were used by vendors. Robusta varieties were commonly found, while the charcoal materials including sonokeling, sambi, and tamarind wood. These differences may influence the aroma flavor profile, and perception of authenticity experienced by consumers. Most consumers were adults between 18 and 55 years old, followed by elderly consumers. The presence of both domestic visitors and tourists indicated that Kopi Jos has become part of the Jakarta culinary tourism attraction. Consumer interest in Kopi Jos was mainly influenced by curiosity and desire to experience its distinctive sensory characteristic. Cultural identity and perceived health-related aspects also contribute to consumer motivation. In contrast, the preference for visiting Angkringan was associated with factors such as atmosphere, accessibility, popularity, taste suitability, and social interaction with friends or family. Together, this finding demonstrates that consumer experience is shaped by both the uniqueness of the beverages and social environment surrounding it. Several variants of Kopi Jos were identified, including coffee with sugar, milk, and ginger. The relatively affordable price range, approximately 5,000 to 12,000 Indonesian rupiah, makes the beverages accessible to various consumer groups and support the continuity of Angkringan businesses. And the conclusion, Kopi Jos represent not only a traditional beverage but also a cultural and social experience closely associated with Yogyakarta's Angkringan culture. Its unique sensory characteristic, affordability, and authentic atmosphere contribute to its appeal and support the sustainability of local small-scale businesses. That's all my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you so much from Miss Nazwa and team. And next we will continue in the Q&A session. Yeah, I think there is two question, Miss Nazwa, in the chat box. The first one from Miss Eka Nurdina. Thank you for the presentation, Miss Nazwa. I have question for you. Why did you choose an ethnographic approach for this study? And then from Miss Olivia to Miss Nazwa, thank you for your explanation in the video. I have a question regarding your sampling process. How did you select the Angkringan location in Yogyakarta? Okay, Miss Nazwa, please respond this question.
Okay. Thank you for the question. The first one from Ms. Eka Nurdina. Why did you choose an ethnographic approach for this study? We choose an ethnographic approach because Kopi Jos is not only a beverage, but also a part of social and cultural experience with Angkringan culture. And this study aimed to understand how consumers interact, socialize, and experience Kopi Jos in its natural setting. Also, by using ethnography, we were able to directly observe everyday practice, social interaction, and culture meanings associated with Kopi Jos. Since Angkringan culture is closely connected with community interaction, local identity, and daily lifestyle, so ethnography was considered the most appropriate approach to comprehensively explore this culture dimension. That's all for Miss Eka Nurdina. And the second one from Miss Alivia Mutiara. How did you select the Angkringan location in Yogyakarta? The location was selected using purposive sampling because the study specifically focused on Angkringan areas that strongly represent Kopi Jos culture in Yogyakarta. We chose Malioboro, Tugu Palputi, Alun-Alun Kidul, and Kranggan Traditional Market because these areas are widely recognized as active Angkringan center and are frequently visited by both local community and tourists. Also, in ethnographic research, ethnographic research frequently visit selecting culture representative location is very important to ensure that the observation truly reflect real community practice and consumer experience. Therefore, the location were considered the most appropriate site for this study.
Yes, okay. Thanks for the answer, Miss Naswa. Okay, I think enough for the Q&A session. Thank you, Miss Naswa and team, for your the presentation and answer. Okay, we can continue to the next presenter from Miss Arum Punirijanti and team with the paper entitled Consumer Perception and Market Readiness Toward Radiation Mutation Food Products, Future Agribusiness Challenges.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Arum. I want to present about consumer perception.
And the audio is not play. I think there is a problem.
Yes, wait a minute.
Radiation mutation food production. Radiation mutation food production overview. Radiation mutation breeding applies controller nuclear technology to induce genetic variation in crops, creating superior plant varieties. This innovation technique This innovation technique has revolution agricultural science since the mid-20th century. Key benefits including high productivity, yield, and enhanced resilience to extreme climates and environmental stresses. Research objective. Number 1, analyze consumer perception of safety and quality of radiation mutation food. Number 2, evaluate market readiness for adoption in food security strategies. Number 3, identify socio-technical barriers to consumer acceptance. Number 4, explore opportunities for agribusiness growth and innovation. Research methodology overview. This study employs a sequential explanatory mix method design integrating qualitative insight with quantitative data. For comprehensive analysis, reviews triangulation of socio-technical barrier ensure validity across multiple data sources. The methodology focused on assessing commercial scalability of nuclear innovation in agriculture. Qualitative-based insight, expert insight, research approach, and key participation. Number 1, purposive in-depth interview with industry experts. Number 2, agricultural biotechnologies and food safety regulators. 3, agribusiness executive and market specialists. 4, thematic analysis mapping institutional trust and regulatory handles. Quantitative-based and customer survey design. Survey structure and sampling methodology. First, large-scale online survey with stratified random and sampling, social, demographic, and psychological determinants. 3, knowledge assessment, scientific literacy, and risk perception. 4, market readiness metrics, purpose, purchase, intent, and willingness to pay. Data analysis approach. Structural equation modeling or SAM using a MOS and Smart Plus software enable rigorous examination of latent variables and complex mediation effects, particularly how institutional trust mediation, the relationship between scientific knowledge and purchase intent. Multi-group analysis across demographic segments reveals variation in consumer perception patterns. Ethical consideration. This research adheres to rigorous ethical standards to ensure participant protection and data integrity. All participants provided informed consent prior to involvement with full transparency about study objectives and data use. Research protocol approach by BRIN with strict data privacy and confidentiality measure maintains throughout. The nuclear stigma and risk perception. Radiophobia represents the dominant psychological barrier to consumer acceptance. Research reveals a significant negative correlation between perceived nuclear risk and purchasing intent. The effect heuristic causes intuitive fear to override scientific safety evidence, even when informed that no residual radiation remains. Consumers persistently associate radiation mutation food with long-term health hazards. Institutional trust as market readiness mediator. Some results demonstrate that higher trust in food safety regulators significantly increase customer willingness to adopt radiation mutation food products. The critical bottleneck is messenger credibility, not the technology itself. Strengthening regulatory transparency is essential for achieving market acceptance. Consumer perception compared with GMOs. Mutation breeding is perceived as more natural than GMOs when applied properly. Consumers show lower resistance compared to genetically modified organisms, viewing radiation mutation as closer to traditional breeding methods. Risk of clustering all high-tech food as unnatural if communication fails. Socioeconomic implications for agribusiness. Key economic findings for market transition. Number one, YTP shows initial price penalty for radiation mutated products. Second, shift value proposition from innovation to tangible benefits. Three, enhanced nutrition and lower price with crop resilience. Number four, consumer-centric branding essential for market transition. Comparison with previous research, current findings confirm the persistent influence of radiophobia and institutional trust documents in early studies. Evidence consistently support the critical need for transparency and consumer education in nuclear food technology adoption. This research highlights a unique strategic window for mutation breeding to gain market acceptance ahead of GMO alternatives. Policy recommendations, strategic government and industrial action. Number one, develop special labels embracing non-GMO mutation. Number two, implement clear science-based risk communication strategies. Three, enhance consumer education programs on mutation benefits. Four, promote safety awareness through transparent information. And the second policy recommendation, continuing strategic action for market success. One, foster collaboration among researchers, policymakers, and industrial stakeholders. Two, promote transparent product labeling to build market trust. Three, support regulatory harmonization across regions. Four, adopt supply chain infrastructure for market integration. This is a feature agree business timeline. Best market integration roadmap for radiation mutation food products. Number one, if we want to make a short term, we need 1 until 3 years. Number two, we make a pilot project and awareness component. Then three, medium term, we need 3 until 7 years. And number four, long term, I think is need 7 years. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Arum and team for the presentation. From audience, we open the Q&A session. Please, if you have any question for Ms. Arum and team. There is no question, right? Okay, maybe from me, Ms. Arum. In your
Yes.
research, you focus in the safety and quality of food products. Why did you
Yes.
choose two of variables?
Yes. Thank you, Miss Nurul. Because radioactive is more dangerous for everybody. We need safety and security and safeguard. If you want to use this product for mutation radiation, I think is.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe the next, what is the relationship with the technological literacy and labeling transparency of the products? So, how to educate to the customer about the radiation mutation food product or GMS?
Yes, we can educate the audience about this product. This product is not irradiated food does not become radioactive. Mutation breeding is different from genetic engineering, and many crops developed through mutation breeding have been consumed safely for decades worldwide. I think food radiation is exposed to control radiation to kill bacteria, insect, or in extend shelf life, and radiation mutation breeding is plants exposed to radiation to create a beneficial general variation such as better resistant to pests or climate stress.
Okay, I think enough, Miss Arum. So you can share your information about that in the social media or others, communities can see what information about the radiation mutation food products. Okay, thank you, Miss Arum.
Thank you.
Yes, we can go to the third presenters and team from Mr. Andrian Haro with the paper entitled Unlocking Halal Value for Sustainability, Integrating One Health and Islamic Marketing in Tropical Bioresource Economies.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, good morning from Indonesia. My name is Andrian Haro, as one of the presenter in the conference in International Seminar on Tropical Bioresources Advancement and Technological or ISOTOBAT 2026 with the theme Tropical Bioresources for the One Health Integrating Biotechnology, Digital Tools and Sustainability. So today I will present of our research regarding with this conference with the title Unlocking Halal Value for Sustainability, Integrating One Health and Islamic Marketing in Tropical Bioresource Economies, which the authors consist of me as Andrian Haro and also my partner Akmaluddin Songkupon from Indonesia, and the next Rashid Atings from Malaysia, and the last Muhammad Syahrul Nizam Ibrahim from Malaysia. So we collaborate to produce this research with the subtheme in the socio-economics and business transformation in tropical bioresources. Okay, so in this presentation, we will explore how halal value can be strategically unlocked to support sustainability by integrating One Health frameworks with the Islamic marketing principles in the tropical bioresource economies. As we know, the tropical regions are among the world's richest sources of biodiversity, supplying agriculture, fisheries, forestry, and bio-based products that support global food security and livelihoods. However, this sector often faces fragmented value chains, weak governance, limited traceability, and challenges related to environmental and challenges related to the public health risks. At the same time, the global halal market has expanded rapidly over the last decade, driven not only by Muslim consumers, but also by non-Muslim consumers who associate halal with safety, hygiene, ethical conduct, and quality assurance. The One Health framework provides a holistic lens that recognizes the interconnectedness of human health, animal health, plant health, and environmental integrity. Islamic marketing through the halal anti principles reinforces ethical production, transparency, and responsibility across value chains. By bringing these two perspectives together, this research responds to contemporary academic and policy debates on how operationalize sustainability in emerging bioresource economies. We move to the next slides. In the tropical bioresource economies, face a complex set of sustainability challenges that undermine their long-term resilience and competitiveness. Despite abundant natural resources, many tropical regions struggle with fragmented supply chains, inconsistent quality standards, limited processing capacity, and unequal value distribution between upstream producers and downstream market actors. This presentation positions these challenges as an opportunity to rethink how halal assurance, public health, and sustainability can be integrated into a unified value creation strategy. The next, we will discuss the primary objective of this research is to examine how integrating the One Health framework with Islamic marketing principles can unlock halal value and drive sustainability in tropical bioresource economies. These objectives collectively respond to gaps in recent halal and sustainability literature, which has often emphasized technical compliance and consumer behavior in isolation, without fully addressing systemic integration and digital value co-creation. In this slide, we will discuss about the two key Two key conceptual foundations underpin this study: the One Health framework and the Halal Tayyib principles of Islamic marketing. One Health is defined as the integrated approach that recognizes the interdependence of human health, animal health, plant health, and environmental systems, while Halal denotes permissibility, and the concept of Tayyib extends this requirement to include wholesomeness, safety, quality, and ethical sourcing. When combined, One Health and Halal Tayyib provide a powerful normative and operational framework. One Health ensures scientific rigor and systemic risk management, while Islamic marketing provides moral legitimacy, consumer resonance, and market differentiation. This integration allows halal value to be positioned not only as religious compliance, but as a comprehensive sustainability proposition relevant to the global markets. In this slides, this will explain about the research methodology. This study adopts a qualitative exploratory methodology using ethnography as the primary analytical approach. Ethnography is particularly suited to examining how meanings, values, and trust are constructed in digital environments. As halal market increasingly rely on online platforms, social media, e-commerce, and digital certification systems, ethnography enables researchers to observe authentic interactions and narratives without disrupting natural behavior. Data were collected from online halal communities, brand platforms, certification body communication, and consumer discussion related to halal sustainability, health, and ethical consumption. In the findings, we indicate that integrating One Health principles with halal assurance significantly strengthens halal value across tropical bioresource value chain. Digital narratives and stakeholder interaction consistently link halal integrity with the concern about food safety, environmental protection, and public health. This alignment also supports regulatory coherence, as health and environmental standards reinforce halal requirements instead of operating in parallel silos. Overall, the integration of One Health and Halal Tayyib principles emerged as a key mechanism for unlocking trust-based and sustainability-oriented halal value. The next, about our major findings concern the role of digital technologies in enabling halal value creation. This innovation aligns with Halal Tayyib values by emphasizing safety, health benefits, and responsible use of natural resources. Together, digital traceability and innovation function as enablers of both market denotes permissibility, and the concept of Tayyib extends this requirement to include wholesomeness, safety, quality, and ethical sourcing. When combined, One Health and Halal Tayyib provide a powerful normative and operational framework. One Health ensures scientific rigor and systemic risk management, while Islamic marketing provides moral legitimacy, consumer resonance, and market differentiation. This integration allows halal value to be positioned not only as religious compliance, but as a comprehensive sustainability proposition relevant to the global markets. In this slides, this will explain about the research methodology. This study adopts a qualitative exploratory methodology using ethnography as the primary analytical approach. Ethnography is particularly suited to examining how meanings, values, and trust are constructed in digital environments. As halal market increasingly rely on online platforms, social media, e-commerce, and digital certification systems, ethnography enables researchers to observe authentic interactions and narratives without disrupting natural behavior. Data were collected from online halal communities, brand platforms, certification body communication, and consumer discussion related to halal sustainability, health, and ethical consumption. In the findings, we indicate that integrating One Health principles with halal assurance significantly strengthens halal value across tropical bioresource value chain. Digital narratives and stakeholder interaction consistently link halal integrity with the concern about food safety, environmental protection, and public health. This alignment also supports regulatory coherence, as health and environmental standards reinforce halal requirements instead of operating in parallel silos. Overall, the integration of One Health and Halal Tayyib principles emerged as a key mechanism for unlocking trust-based and sustainability-oriented halal value. The next, about our major findings concern the role of digital technologies in enabling halal value creation. This innovation aligns with Halal Tayyib values by emphasizing safety, health benefits, and responsible use of natural resources. Together, digital traceability and innovation function as enablers of both market competitiveness and sustainability. The integration of One Health and Islamic marketing also generates significant socio-economic benefit, particularly for micro, small, medium enterprises and rural communities in tropical regions. This reinforces a virtuous cycle in which sustainability, trust, and economic inclusion mutually reinforce halal value creation. In these slides, we will discuss about the conceptual framework developed in this study, visually integrates the key elements identified through the ethnographic analysis. In this framework is designed to be adaptable across different tropical bioresource sectors and scalable from local to global markets. As a visual infographic, it supports strategic communication for policymakers, businesses, and development agencies seeking to operationalize sustainable halal ecosystem. In this our last slide regarding with the implication and conclusion, this study offers several important implications for theory, practice, and policy. In conclusion, integrating One Health and Islamic marketing unlock halal value by aligning ethics, science, and digital transformation. This integration has strong potential to foster sustainable socio-economic growth while meeting the evolving expectation of global consumers. So this is the last slide of our presentation. So we want to thank you for all of attention. Hopefully, this research will have will have a benefit for the others, and we can discuss further for about this research. Thank you so much for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Andrian and team for the presentation. For audience, maybe any question to Mr. Andrian? Okay, I think there is no question. Okay, maybe from me, Mr. Andrian. In your research, you use ethnography, in methodology. Maybe you can explain more about it. And then, how about the sample in your research? How many and who is the sample in this research? This is my question.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nurul. So regarding with the research method in this research, we using the ethnography method. We compile from the online response from the platform, several from the digital from the halal communities platform in the media in the social media and also in the some the brand platform that regarding relevance with the One Health and also this Islamic marketing. So about the sample in this research, we use the 10 informant that source from the each platform of this online platform from this research. So I mean that from like the from halal communities platform, we put several informant and also the brand platform that focusing for this issue. We put some informant and also from the other consumer discussion we put also as the informant in this sample for the this research.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Andrian. I think enough from me and maybe from audience. Okay, I think enough too from the audience. So thank you, Mr. Andrian and team for your presentation. Okay,
Thank you.
yes, we can continue the fourth presenters and team. It is from Miss Lily and team with the paper Adoption of Apple Waste Processing in the Agricultural Sector, the Potential Utilization of Tropical Bioresources for Sustainable Farming.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, we like to say thank you for the opportunity to present our research in the third international seminar on tropical bioresources advancement and technology. Our research entitled Adoption of Apple Waste Processing in the Agricultural Sector, the Potential Utilization of Tropical Bioresources for Sustainable Farming. So you can see here the waste of apple farming can be in the form of branches, the rejected fruits, and also the weed. Why we take this topic because apple farming in Indonesia faces sustainability challenge from both economic and environmental perspective. As we can see in the figure 1, that the apple production and harvested area in 2023 has declined sharply, while the import apple rising. That's an indication that the market still exists. Why we want to sustain? Because the local fresh apple market has developed into several consumer segments. It's also made the small medium enterprise running for the commodity. And some observation and research suggest that the factors that behind the decline is like an iceberg. There's several factors from high input costs to climate change, and they suggest for the solution is the implementation of environmentally friendly farming practice and waste utilization. The research objective is to identify the factors influencing the adoption of environmentally friendly agricultures and the utilization of apple farm waste. Based on preliminary study, why we highlight the waste and the environmentally friendly, because based on preliminary study, farmers who implement these two practices are more likely to remain in farming and gain profits. Apple orchards also generate considerable amount of biomass waste, including fallen flowers, pruned branch, drop fruits, and section of tree stem produced during orchard maintenance and harvesting activity. Studies have shown that apple orchard biomass that used as mulch can improve soil physical characteristics and restore organic matter into the system. The research methodology, we took 2 locations, first in the Bumi Aji Batu and the second in Nongkol Jajar in Pasuruan Regency. A mixed methods approach combining qualitative and quantitative was employed in the study that done in 2025. First, we try to affirm that there's information of practice that adopted by apple farmer who are still actively engaged in apple farming. We use deep interview with 10 apple farmer in Batu City and 10 apple farmer in Pasuruan Regency who experienced profits and initially implemented input and efficiency practice or environmentally friendly inputs. Then after it's firm that that's farmer that still gain profit from environmentally friendly implementation, we try to identify factors influencing the adoption of environmentally friendly agriculture and the utilization of apple farming waste using the econometric modeling. The research results that it's from that there's a circular bioeconomic practice or environmentally friendly practice identified in the apple farming that still gain profits. The first one is soil amendment, the use of soil amendment, and some farmers utilize the apple waste to make the soil amendments. Even it's small farmer that use it. The second, intercropping, and the third is the valorization of rejected fruit that used to process apple vinegar, and the utilization of pruning biomass and sell it to small animal feed like hamster. There's farmers that also make packaging waste to recycle it and use it to pay school. There's collaboration with school. After we form that, yes, they use environmentally friendly and the utilization of waste in the farmer that still gain profit. We try to take survey. So to 198 respondents, and this is the characteristic of the respondent and the farm. So the years of the respondents in mean is 47 to 48 years, so it's not young, but still there's young that still interest in this apple farming. And the majority of the education level is elementary school, with the farming experience is variated from the minimum is 1 and the higher is 55 years experience in apple farming. And the average production, the mean is 4,815 kilos. So when we try to take the model, we try to evaluate from the table 3 shown that the model is reliable and have EVE values is more than 0.5, so the model is valid and can be used for interpretation. How is the hypothesis what factors that make the farmer adopt this environmentally practice and practice farming and the utilization of waste with the R square 59%. So as we can see here, the perceived benefits is influence the adoption more than the other. So this is perceived benefit, this is perceived use, is institutional trust, P is experience, and SN is social norm, and AD is adoption willingness. The bold value indicates statistically significant paths based on p-value and p-value. So as we can see here, they will adopt if they assume that the benefit is sure and the institutional is already given their trust, the experience, and the social norms also support. But the most important thing in here that they will to adopt if the benefit is positive. This is our results in our research. Thank you. Hope we can do more for the local farmer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Miss Lily and team. And then we continue to Q&A session, and we have one question from Mr. Zainuri Hanif in the chat box. Bu Lili, among the 5 circular bioeconomic practices identified at the apple farm level, which practice is the most realistic to scale up to more farmers, and what is the main constraint? It is cost, farmers' knowledge, market access, or institutional support? This is the question, Miss Lily.
Mr. Hanif. So among the 5 circular bioeconomic practice that identified is used by local farmer, firstly, the soil amendment is become the most realistic to scale up the productivity. This is according to we use a focus group discussion. So what can we done first to make the productivity stable at the first level? So the first thing is the using of the soil amendment, because in this research we also support by the lab analysis in soil, and the results shown that the the phosphor and nitrogen that tied in the soil is higher, so it needs soil amendment to release it and can be used for the tree. What is the main constraint? So there's two. Actually, we try doing the for two location is the main constraint is different, but in here we more showing the result for what factor that they can adopt, what factor make them adopt, the local farmer adopt the friendly budidaya apel ya, untuk apple farming, friendly apple farming and waste utilization. But for the amendment, soil amendment, we try to make separate. So in these two region is the constraint is different. In the Batu region, the constraint is social norm, while in the Pasuruan, the constraint is more to perceive benefit. Maybe this is also from the background of the farmer. In the Batu farmer is more higher experience, and the farmer is already in age. So maybe that's my answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Miss Lily. Yes, I think enough for the Q&A session because time is limit. Okay, thank you, Miss Lily and team. Good luck for your business. Thank you. Next for the fifth presenter. Yeah, we have Muhammad Rian Hardiansah and team with the title Green Energy Transition. Do ESG scores enhance corporate performance and firm value?
Today, I will present my research titled Green Energy Transition. Do ESG scores enhance corporate performance and firm value? Written by my colleague Muhammad Rian Hardiansyah and I. This presentation analyzes how sustainability metrics influence the financial success and market valuation of energy companies in Indonesia. We explore a decade of data to understand which specific ESG pillar drive corporate performance in this critical industry. In recent years, ESG has shifted from a secondary corporate responsibility to a primary factor influencing financial performance and company value globally. In Indonesia, public attention to environmental exploitation and climate change has made ESG a major topic for shareholders. Survey data shows that 84% of Indonesian investors are specifically interested in climate change issues. While awareness is high, only 1 in 4 investors currently holds shares in ESG-focused companies, often citing a preference for low-risk instruments. Approximately 58% of companies report that high implementation costs and a lack of government support are major hurdles. Furthermore, over half of the surveyed companies struggle to meet complex ESG performance indicators or lack a deep understanding of the concept. The energy sector is the largest contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions, making it the front line for the transition to sustainable business. In Indonesia, the energy sector contributes approximately 48.64% of national emissions, primarily from electricity and transport. Let's see now theoretical framework for this research. Stakeholder theory suggests companies must create value for all parties, while signaling theory posits that ESG disclosures serve as positive signals to reduce information asymmetry. Legitimacy theory further explains that companies adopt ESG to maintain their social license to operate. This study utilizes a purposive sampling method, selecting 7 major energy companies listed on the IDX ESG Leaders Index and Refinitiv Icon. Data was collected over a 10-year period from 2015 to 2024 to ensure a comprehensive longitudinal analysis. The study focuses on 7 industry leaders, namely EKR Corporindo, Alamtree Resources, Bumi Resources, Indo Tambang Raya Mega, Perusahaan Gas Negara, Bukit Asam, and United Tractors. These companies represent subsectors including coal, oil and gas, and natural gas utilities. We then analyze the independent pillars, environmental, social, and governance scores against 3 performance metrics: ROA for operational efficiency, ROE for financial return, and Tobin skew for market value. Firm size and leverage are used as control variables. Based on Cho, Hausman, and Lagrange multiplier test, the random event model or REM was determined to be the most appropriate regression approach for this data panel. This model effectively captures variation across both companies and time. The results show that the environmental score has a positive and significant impact on ROA, meaning better environmental management leads to higher operational efficiency. Conversely, social and governance scores did not show a significant impact on ROA in this sector. Similar to ROA, the environmental score is a significant driver of financial performance with a positive effect on ROE. This indicates that investors and managers in the energy sector see direct financial gains from environmental sustainability. In terms of market valuation, only the environmental score significantly increases Tobin skew. This demonstrates that the market specifically rewards energy companies that manage the environmental impact and carbon emissions effectively. The dominance of the environmental pillar is due to the energy sector's high exposure to carbon risk and environmental regulations. Investors in this sector prioritize green initiatives over social or governance metrics, which may take longer to yield visible financial results. In conclusion, the environmental score is the primary ESG driver of performance and value for Indonesian energy firms. Companies should prioritize environmental transparency and efficiency, while regulators should continue supporting broader ESG adoption across all three pillars. That's all our presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ali and team. We will continue to Q&A session again. Okay, from audience, maybe do you have any question? Okay, there is no question. Okay, maybe from me. In your research, I see you just focus in ROA and ROE. Why did you choose just two variables? This is my question. And then we have one question again from Mr. Zainuri Hanif. Okay, yes. Could the positive relationship between environmental score and firm value reflect investor perception rather than actual operational improvement? So we have two questions for you, Mr. Rian and Mr. Ali. Sorry, Mr. Rian, I cannot hear your voice.
Test.
Yes, yes,
Is-
yes. I can hear your voice clearly.
Okay. Sorry for the problems. Okay, thank you, Ms. Nurul, for the questions. So why I chose ROA, ROE, and Tobin skew for the proxy. And these three indicators were selected to provide a more comprehensive evaluations on firm performance. And ROA measures operational efficiency, ROE measures returns to shareholders, and Tobin skew reflect market perceptions on firm value. And therefore, by combining accounting-based and market-based indicators, the analysis becomes more comprehensive. So that's for your questions. And for Mr. Zainuri Hanif, thank you for the question too. Of course, it's possible, and a positive relationship between environmental scores and firm value may reflect investor perceptions and market confidence rather than direct operational improvement. And in a study, firm value is measuring using Tobin skew, which is market-based indicator. So companies have a better environmental performance, sustainability disclosures, and investors may perceive them as a lower risk and more sustainable in the long term. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rian. Yes, Mr. Zainuri, I think enough.
Enough, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yes, thank you again to Mr. Rian and Mr. Ali for the presentation and Q&A session. So we can continue to the last presenters. Yeah. Okay. We have Miss Intan and team will present about the regional development typology in the Jabodetabek metropolitan area, Indonesia.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Intan Azahra Syam, a student of Department of Soil Science and Land Resources, IPB University. Good morning. Today, I'm glad to share with you my paper with the title Regional Development Typology in the Jabodetabek Metropolitan Area, Indonesia. First is introduction. Bogor, Depok, Tangerang, and Bekasi areas, based on Government Regulation Number 26 of 2008, referred to as the Jabodetabek region, is one of the largest metropolitan area in Indonesia. This region experienced rapid urban growth, economic concentrations, and increasing population movement. However, development is partially uneven. Some regions develop rapidly, while others lag behind due to differences in infrastructures, public facilities, and accessibilities. Therefore, this study aims to analyze the level of regional development in the Jabodetabek metropolitan area by identifying regional hierarchy using scalagram analysis, examine regional development dynamics in 2018 and 2024, and measure spatial inequality using Thiel Entropy Index. The study used Village Potential Statistic or PODES data from 2018 and 2024. The analysis unit was 184 sub-districts in Jabodetabek metropolitan area. Variables include public facilities, infrastructures, and socio-economic services. The study used the method that used in the study are scalagram analysis, was applied to determine the regional development hierarchy. Next is growth rate analysis with the formula you can see on the screen. Next is Thiel Entropy Index, was used to measure regional development inequality. And the last is K-means clustering with the formula that you can see on the screen. Next is result and discussion. First is regional development hierarchy based on scalagram analysis. Metropolitan core areas recorded higher RDI values than peripheral regions. As you can see on the table, Bogor Tengah recorded the highest RDI values. High RDI values indicate more complete educational, healthcare, economic, and transportation facilities. Next is regional development dynamics. Increasing RDI values indicate improvement in public facilities and services. As you can see on the table, Bekasi Selatan experienced the most significant development growth. Regions with better accessibility and stronger economic activities develop faster. Peripheral regions have started to develop but remain below metropolitan core areas. Next is regions with declining development. Not all regions experience development improvement. Several regions recording declining RDI values. The decline indicates slower development of facilities and public services. Next is growth rate analysis. Rates were calculated based on change in RDI values from 2018 till 2024. Regional growth varied among sub-districts. Regions with better infrastructure access and higher investment grew faster. As you can see on the table, the green color shows us the upgrading development, and the red one shows the declining. Next is regional inequality analysis. Regional inequality was analyzed using Thiel entropy index. Development inequality in Jabodetabek remains relatively high. Inequality is dominated by within regional inequality. Bekasi recorded the largest contribution to regional inequality. Inequality is influenced by infrastructure, investment, economic activities, and public facilities. Development remains concentrated in metropolitan core areas. Next is regional typology analysis based on K-means cluster method. With this K-means cluster method, we successfully classify the clustering to 3 clusters. Cluster 1 is represented by yellow color, which is developing areas. Cluster 2 is represented by red color, which is stagnant areas. And cluster 3 represented by green color, which is advanced area. Spatially, the distribution pattern shows that advanced areas are widely distributed in several peripheral parts of the region, while developing areas dominate the central areas. Meanwhile, stagnant areas appear in several specific locations, indicating disparities in regional development across the study area. Last is conclusion. Scalagram analysis show that regional development in Jabodetabek remains uneven and concentrated in metropolitan core area. Bogor Tengah recorded the highest regional development index or RDI value in both 2018 and 2024, indicating the highest level of regional development. Growth rate analysis revealed differences in regional development dynamics, where some regions experience significant growth, while others recorded declining development. The Thiel entropy index analysis indicated that regional inequality in Jabodetabek remains high and is dominated by within regional inequality. Bekasi recorded the largest contribution to regional inequality within the Jabodetabek metropolitan area. K-means clustering successfully classified the study area to 3 region typologies. The clustering result consists of developing, stagnant, and advanced area. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Miss Intan and team for the presentation, your research finding. Okay, we will continue again in the Q&A session. Yes, we have one question, Miss Intan, in the chat box from Mr. Zainuri again. Thank you, Mr. Zainuri. Mbak Intan, based on the K-means result, why are some peripheral areas classified as advanced areas, while some areas closer to the metropolitan core are still classified as developing or stagnant areas? This is the question, Miss Intan.
Okay, for Mr. Zainuri, thank you for the questions. So we use K-means clustering is for classify the area based on the similarities of each district. So although the district is on a peripheral side, it doesn't mean that the district is not advanced. It doesn't mean too that the core area is not developing anymore. So the K-means clustering is used two variables. First is RDI for 2018 and 2024, and the second is growth rate analysis. So based on that two variables, some areas is classified to stagnant, and some area is classified by developing areas.
Okay, thank you, Miss Intan. For Mr. Zainuri, it's enough, or do you have any follow-up question?
I think it's clear. Thank you very much, Mbak Intan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zainur, for your response. Okay, I think enough because the time is up right now. Thank you for Miss Intan and team, and also for the all presenters in the parallel session today. Thank you, and I will give back to Miss Bunga. Thank you, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Ibu Nurul Hidayati, for leading to this presentation session. We are truly pleased to have you as our moderator today. Thank you for your insightful guidance in our parallel session. And once again, thank you very much to Ibu Nurul. I hope we can collaborate with you on another occasion. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of today's parallel session for the socioeconomic and business transformation in tropical bioresource subthemes. I would like to thank you for your participation today. I would also like kind remind you to complete the attendance form in the Google chat box. And also, once again, thank you very much for the moderator, invited speaker, a presenter, and audience. And we will take a short break until 1:40 p.m. in this Zoom for the subtheme agriculture, animal science, agroforestry, and agromaritime innovation. And also for the closing ceremony in the main session at 4 p.m. I am Bunga as Master Ceremony, and we will take my leave. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank
Waalaikumsalam
you
warahmatullahi
for
wabarakatuh. Thank you, Miss Bunga and
yeah.
everyone.